invited is because we do this. We do a lot of work on trends in armed conflict, and we've shown that the trends are moving down. And obviously, when trends in armed conflict move down, there has to be a reason. And we've been looking into the reason and asking ourselves the question, what are the causes? And preventive diplomacy doesn't appear to be one of the causes. Lots of other things have caused them to come down, but not preventive diplomacy. Which isn't to say that it's not important, it really is important, but there's not very much of it that was done. What's really important to something like this is connections that are made, and people who find they have common interests, didn't realise that other people are working in the same area. Those are the things that really make a difference. I mean, one of the concrete recommendations which has come out already, which is a really important one, is that there should be a tenfold increase in the amount of money that's being spent by the UN and the international community generally on preventive diplomacy. I mean, is that 10 times? That's huge. But the amount of money that's been spent on preventive diplomacy now is tiny. It's very, very small. Preventive diplomacy, you don't have to have soldiers, you don't have to have tanks, you don't have to have helicopters. All you have to do is just small groups of people with a lot of common sense and a pretty clear idea of what it is that needs to be done to try to resolve conflicts before they reach the stage where everything falls apart. For a very, very long time, member states of the United Nations, particularly in the developing world, which is where nearly all the conflicts take place, were worried and concerned that any form of external intervention would be a threat to their notions of sovereignty. That was one thing. The second thing was that it is extremely difficult to coordinate these sorts of activities, especially when you very often you may have 4 or 5 different people working on different parts of a preventive diplomacy mission and not working together effectively, not coordinating effectively. The Secretary General of the UN himself was saying that in the Department of Political Affairs, which has responsibility for preventive diplomacy, we don't have time to do it. As in 2007.
Amazing.
Now they've got 50 new appointments, posts, and that means they can do some, but they've now got the people, but they don't have the resources to put the people in the field and give the people what they actually need in the field. So the really interesting question is, preventive diplomacy doesn't seem to work very well. Is this because there's something wrong with preventive diplomacy, or because it hasn't been tried? And most of the time it's because it hasn't been tried. That's mostly because developing countries are concerned that this is, in some sense or other, I don't know what to say. Not only a threat to their sovereignty, but if you say, okay, to invite somebody in to come in and do preventive diplomacy, you're effectively saying we can't manage this ourselves, and that governments are very, very reluctant to do. Now, once you've actually got a war going on, it's very clear they can't manage it on their own, and so they're then more likely to invite in mediators or to accept mediators.
Great. And if you had just one recommendation you could make to improve the state of preventive diplomacy, what would it be?
Money.
Money.
10 times increase. It's a really, really good recommendation. It's not very expensive. It would make a phenomenal difference. And if you look at the amount of money that's being spent on preventive diplomacy now, incredibly. You could count the 50 posts in DPA, 18 missions in the ground. I'm just guessing, but that would be, we'd be talking less than $100 million. Talking about peacekeeping, you're talking $8.5 billion. If you're talking about security more generally and what's spent on defense, you're talking about $1.5 trillion. So peacekeeping is a small fraction of 1% of the total world military expenditure. And preventive diplomacy wouldn't even register because so little is spent on it. I mean, potentially, it's huge, because if you can stop a conflict, you've saved huge amounts of money.